Okay, so now we're going to take a look at Anna 2's ARP. And this one's also going to be found in a little tab here in the display. So if we click on that, we can see the ARP window here. And as far as an arpeggiator goes, this really works very well. It's very intuitive and simple to use. And it gives you control that is really convenient to work with. Plus, once we pair it with the chord memory device, we're going to be able to do even more. But for now, we'll just run through all the controls and what everything does in here, so we have a grasp of that. To start off, we have an on-off button. That, of course, is just going to enable the arpeggiator. And you can also enable and disable from the front panel. You just click on this button here, and that will also display when it's on, so you can get a quick glance of whatever is enabled or not. There's also a preset lock here, and what that's going to do is lock in whatever your settings are for whenever you change the overall Anna 2 preset. It sticks on to the ARP preset when this is enabled, so that way you can sample through a lot of different sounds with the same arpeggiating playing. You can also click here to display the chord memory device window as well, but we're not into that quite yet. However, that can be a handy tool when you start to pair the two together. As for controls here, we have the preset to choose from. We can pick from whatever these pre-programmed ones happen to be, or you can program whatever you want and save yours as a file if you make something you like for the pattern. But it's also pretty easy to just click and browse through a few different ones if you want to play around and start from something. For the controls here, we change the amount of steps. And by steps, that's just going to be each line of this grid where you can program in notes to trigger. And each of these divisions is going to be a fraction of the tempo set by the rate. So right now we have a 16th note if we enable the ARP. But we could go a little slower if we change it to an 8th note. And those note divisions are based on the tempo of your DAW if sync is on. So right now 130 is the tempo I have. So we have an 8th note of that 130, but if I turn sync off, we'll run by this tempo. So whatever we have for this tempo, which is unlinked to the DAW, will be played. But generally, you'll probably be keeping it synced to your DAW's tempo. For these buttons here, hold is just going to keep a note held even if you let go of the keyboard. So it just keeps playing through. Retrigger will make it so that the ARP will start over at the beginning every time a note is played. And if it's not on, it will just continue from the place it is currently located. And then the clear button will obviously just clear the entire thing. So basically you set how long you want to have with the steps, and you'll notice that you can go further than 16 steps, which is what's available here. And those further notes are just in these other subdivisions here of 16 steps. So you can make a very long looping pattern in the ARP, and you'll see just how long it is by looking at this white bar and seeing it in the different subdivisions of 16 steps. But so far I've just really been doing one note to show the rhythmic sort of programming here, but you'll notice the note order over here, and that's going to relate to how the ARP actually decides which notes to play. Starting with the simplest one, we can just go low to high, and you'll see on the side of the ARP here, there's note 1 through 6, and you'll note that when I play a note on the keyboard, I can have it go up to 6 in different notes that I play. And essentially all that this will mean is that when I click in here to put in a note, the first note I play is note 1, and then note 2 would be the second, and so forth. And you just click to add in these notes, and you can add them on top of each other, or you can add them as chords or combinations of the notes, or however you want to program everything. And you just click to add or delete any note to fill in a step. And you can click and drag to have longer ones, the same to delete, or you can change the length and set it up to play whatever notes you want it to play along however long of an amount of steps. So we'll keep it on 16 steps, so it's just going for this first 16 and we can see everything that's happening. And I will just program in a pattern that's going to use all of the notes available, and then I'll just hold down 6 different keys. And we'll get the pattern of those notes however we programmed it. Now you'll note that if I don't play 6 notes, it only plays the notes I have pressed down and not the others, and that's going to be related to the note order here. So low to high starts at note 1, and as you add more, it adds up to 6. High to low, the opposite, 6 to 1. And basically you see which ones are active by holding down. You can see that with high to low, the first note you play is played on 6, and as you add them, it works down. Note wrap just starts at the bottom with 1. And as it goes up, if you play less notes than 6, it starts over again at 1 for the remaining ones. Octave wrap does the same thing except for continues up an octave. so you can have whatever notes you want there. Note wrap will probably be the most common one, but you can play around with however you want to do it, depending on how you want the ARP to travel. But one thing I do want to mention is that the order of your notes will go from lowest note to highest note when you play them. So the order that you press your keys down will be organized in the notes 1 through 6, simply from low to high or high to low as you set them. But in doing that, you can do some pretty cool rhythms. Additionally, there's a few other controls that you have here. If you want to have it run by whatever rhythm here, you can change the gate, which is just going to be the amount of time that a note is held when triggered. And then there's also a swing, which you can start to give it more of a triplet or swung feel. So that is nice. If you want to program anything in, you can also copy each of these. So if you have 16th notes, it's basically like you're copying a measure onto any of the other groups of 16 steps. But in that case, you could take them in there and program something else. And you'll notice that these ones are grayed out because the top, again, does not have those steps in play, but you can turn it up, find where it is in play if you want to do that. And that way you could have different things happen in different measures of a programmed ARP. Continuing through here, you'll notice that we do have an octave up button. And this is still on the same steps of the pattern, but we are actually just an octave up. So if we wanted to program additional notes, it's going to use the same notes except for up an octave, and you can layer those on. You can make even chords on top. And in a similar manner, you could do octave down. And so you can really get a full sound, both an octave up and down, to hit a lot of different timbres with a sound in an ARP. But aside from just notes, we also have mod sources that we can set. And this is similar, except for instead of using a note, you're just dragging in a value, and it's going to run with the same amount of steps. So if we then go ahead and clear out all of the notes in each of the different octaves, we can then drag out just one long note. So we're just going to hold the first trigger on note 1. So it's just going to hold the sound whenever I hold a key. And for this mod 1, we'll just give it whatever setup. We'll make it 16 steps. I can double click to reset to that. And now essentially this is just a mod source for a value. So we can select a target through here, or we can also just right click on a target and set it to ARP1. And you'll see that it selected it for us here. And now basically this is just going to adjust that amount. And I can adjust that by a percentage of that with this mod knob. So that can be very cool. And just like everything else, you can clear it here too, and it removes it. And you'll be able to work with those in the mod matrix just the same if you want to add them that way. And these two are virtually the same idea. You can just draw things in and link them to wherever you might want to. You'll see that you have mod 1 and mod 2 amounts, and then their respective knobs for changing the amount. And that FM isn't actually doing anything because oscillator 2 wasn't on, but I'm going to turn it on so that we have some sound. And that might not be something we want to have on there, but it certainly is the case that we can link it anywhere, and that can be very powerful in how we can program things. And just having that mod source is very helpful. Speaking of which, in a similar situation again, we have the same sort of deal with the velocity. And basically this looks about the same, except for it is just the velocity value as opposed to a mod source. And right now this isn't going to make a difference if the velocity doesn't have any link to it, but if we do set some velocity sensitivity, and that should be triggering a velocity difference for every triggered note. And I actually do need to have multiple notes for those velocities to actually trigger again. And that didn't happen since we didn't have multiple notes at a time. We just had that one long note, so it only triggered the one time. But essentially, this gives us a way to program multiple things just by holding down a series of notes. And like I said before, once we get to the chord memory device, this is going to be as simple as holding down a key. But you can find all kinds of really cool patterns that this will be playing for you, and make whatever edits you may want to make to it. Change things over, paste them into different spots, have them be weird intervals of steps or anything like that, and play around, chord memory device, anything like that, to be a really solid tool when using Anna 2. But that'll cover the ARP, and now we are ready to get into the chord memory device in the next video, so I will see you then.